It's a total dumpster fire. I think it's garbage. I think that it's shameful that people that celebrate Doge coming in, and yet we're going to vote for another $1 billion to be added to the deficit. And so it's ironic.
It's opposite of what the Doge Commission is trying to do. So am I voting for it? No, I'm not.
We're just fundamentally unserious about spending. And as long as you got a blank check, you can't shrink government. If you can't shrink government, you can't live free.
Well, there you got some Republicans on Capitol Hill calling it a Christmas present Americans shouldn't want. Others call it a dumpster fire, as the House tries hammering out a deal to fund a government spending bill and avoid the Friday midnight shutdown deadline.
So will it pass? They got 72 hours. House Speaker Mike Johnson joins us now. Now, Mr. Speaker, you expected some blowback when you were putting this together as you try to get across the finish line and have the government pay for itself up until March. What could you tell us about this bill, and does it disturb you? Some Republicans seem to be very critical of it.
No, look, those are three of my great friends you just quoted there. They're not wrong about the government debt and deficits. It bothers us all. We've got it in our central focus. And when we start the new Congress in January, when Republicans are in control and Doge is working on all 6 cylinders, we're going to be able to scale back the size and scope of government. But before we get to that point, remember, right now, we only control 1/2 of 1/3 of the federal government. Remember, Democrats are still in charge of the Senate and the White House. So what we've done is the conservative play call here, my friends that you just interviewed there, or that those clips were played, were part of this decision. We decided, even though we don't normally like short-term stopgap funding measures, it made sense here. Instead of doing, Chuck Schumer and Biden spending for 2025, we pushed this decision into March. It'll be March 14th. So the feature there is that we'll have Republican-controlled Congress and Trump back in the White House, and we get to decide spending for 2025. So that was a good thing. Yeah.
But, Mr. Speaker, I think the confusing part is because typically when there's objection to bills like that, you hear the Freedom Caucus, which you heard Chip Roy. But you even have moderate members who are in big races. You got Mike Lawler, who is not, an extreme, fiscal conservative, but he's saying the same thing. So how did you lose the Freedom Caucus and the moderate members?
This is the sausage-making process, okay? Here's what this bill entails. It's a short-term funding extension until March 14, and that would have been an easy thing relatively to pass. But here's what happened. We also had to add, and due to circumstances outside of any of our control, emergency funding. We have 2 major emergencies. We had a record historic hurricane season that we all know, Helene and Milton and the rest, that destroyed a big swath of the country. We have to have funding for that. That's $100 billion to rebuild 6 states. And then on top of that, we have our farmers, our small farmers and ranchers, our food producers in this country are in jeopardy of going under permanently. They've had 3 lost years in a row, primarily because of Bidenomics and inflation and lots of other factors outside their control. So for the first time since I've been in Congress, guys, in 8 years, it's not just farmers and ranchers urgently needing the help. We now have the creditors, the lenders, the banks who give them those loans, who are saying we have to have a stopgap measure. So when you add those things in, here's the other thing to remember. Our Democrat colleagues who have to vote on all this, they don't prioritize agriculture. They don't really care that much about farmers and ranchers because they're in rural red districts, right? But that's our food supply. If we crush domestic food supply, that is a direct threat to national security. We need all those small farmers and ranchers, and that's included in the bill as well. So when you add all those things together, that's what makes people nervous because the price.
You really don't have a choice. We have to fund those. We have to fund FEMA. We have to fund our farmers.
Right. And Mr. Speaker, it's not just, so you've got a bunch of Republicans who are angry at you. They don't like this. And just in a couple of weeks, you're going to stand once again to run for Speaker of the House. And you don't need a bunch of Democrats mad at you. But and this is breaking news you do not know. You know who also does not like this? Elon Musk, the world's richest man, just tweeted, this bill should not pass. The only way you're going to be able to pass it now, Mr. Speaker, is with Democrats. If you could, what's your message to Elon Musk?
Well, I was communicating with Elon last night. Elon and Vivek and I are on a text chain together. And I was explaining to them the background of this. And Vivek and I talked last night about almost midnight. And he said, look, I get it. He said, we understand you're in an impossible position. Everybody knows that. Remember, guys, we still have just a razor thin margin of Republicans. So any bill has to have Democrat votes. They understand the situation. They said, it's not directed to you, Mr. Speaker, but we don't like the spending. I said, guess what, fellas? I don't either. We got to get this done because here's the key. By doing this, we are clearing the decks and we are setting up for Trump to come in roaring back with the America First agenda. That's what we're going to run with gusto beginning January 3rd when we start the new Congress, when Republicans, again, are in control. And all of our fiscal conservative friends, I'm one of them, will be able to finally do the things that we have been wanting to do for the last couple of years. Right now, Democrats still control the pens, and that's the problem. So we got to get this thing done so we don't have the shutdown, so we get the short-term funding measure, and we get to March where we can put our fingerprints on the spending. That's when the big changes start, and we can't wait to get there.
Right. We'll see. We'll get there. And if you guys could write a bill where you get all the committees submit a bill and a budget, it would make it a lot easier. It wouldn't be this sprint on Christmas. So I just had a chance to talk to Paris Hilton. She's been sponsoring a bill about child abuse. She experienced horrible situations in the 4 facilities she was in as a teen. You know she's been working hard on this. It passed the Senate. Will it pass the House? Will you guys put it on the floor?
Yeah, I think it's going to be on the floor before we end the Congress, and I think it will pass with a bipartisan margin. Paris has done a great job advocating for that. Hats off to her. She's really spent a lot of time on the Hill over the last couple of years, and that's what it takes sometimes. It's a long process. I wish it wasn't in many cases, but this is something I think that whose time has come. You're going to need some oversight to prevent abuses of children, and we're for that in any sector. Paris has done a great job there.
So they'll get Democrats and Republicans.
And speaking of that,
I think so.
Speaking of that, abuse of children, we've done so many stories on kids that are abused online, either exploited through AI. They take off their clothes and make it appear that this little girl who's 14 years old actually posted a nude picture when that really didn't happen. We've done all these stories, suicide stories, eating disorders. So there's a bill, the Kids Online Safety Act, and it's stalled in the House. I know that conservatives are worried that it's going to censor conservative voices. Can you dive into that a little? Give us an example of how that could happen?
Yeah, let me say first, Senator Marsha Blackburn, Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers, everyone who worked so hard to get COSA, that's the bill COSA, together, or to be commended for their work. We all share the same urgent desire, and that is to protect children. I devoted my life to that. I did it in the legal arena before I became a lawmaker in the courts. But we've got to make sure we do this right. And when you're talking about regulating online content, you have to make sure that it doesn't provide an avenue to censor conservative speech. Right. And I used to be a constitutional law litigator. A lot of my colleagues in that space are very concerned about this. I mean, religious liberty advocates and pro-family organizations very concerned that we got to make sure the language is tight. So we're almost there. Right. I just feel like this bill doesn't go far enough in that protection, and we'll get it done early next year. They'll be able to take a victory lap, and we'll protect children.
Mr. Speaker, we've had some guests on who have addressed this. They are behind this. This is a bipartisan bill. Both sides like it. It is passed the Senate. It is sitting on your desk. We had a guest a couple of days ago who suggested that one of the reasons you're not taking it up is because Meta, which would be impacted, is going to build a $10 billion facility for AI in northern Louisiana.
That's a creative argument. I mean, that's not even in my district, okay? Look, we're glad of the investment in Louisiana, but it has nothing whatsoever to do with this. Look, my background for 25 years has been in this space of free speech, the protection of those safeguards for conservative speech. Because remember, guys, anytime there's a movement to censor and silence voices, it's always the conservatives. So we can both protect children and safeguard the First Amendment. We have to get that right. You cannot do it, in a haphazard manner. I'm not saying that's what this work was or effort was, but I'm saying we can improve it and get it done, and we will get it done. We're going to pass this in the first part of next year.
So, Mr. Speaker, let's talk about these drones. The White House has been clear that they pose no threat, but they don't know the origin of these drones. I know you're in the Gang of 8. Does our government know exactly who operates these drones? Is it our government operating these drones? Because they don't seem concerned at all about them.
No, they don't. And look, I'm the Speaker of the House. I have the exact same frustration that you do and all of us do. We don't have the answers. The administration is not providing it. I set up a briefing between DOD, DHS, and FBI with members last week, and the answers are not forthcoming. They just say, don't worry about it. It's not foreign entities. There's not a vessel offshore doing this, and they're not collecting data. Okay, then what is it? You know, you heard Mayorkas, who no one believes. We impeached him in the House, as you know, the DHS secretary. He said in an interview a couple of days ago, well, because they changed the regulation to allow drones to fly at night, that's why everybody's seeing them now. They've always been there. I mean, look, people are not buying the answers. We are digging in further to get the answers, and we're demanding that the administration do its job. We got to protect Americans, protect our intelligence, of course, and our data and everything else. So we're going to get down to the bottom of it, but we don't have the answers yet. That's
Joe Biden says we're following it closely. So far, no sense of danger. I feel so much better.
This is why we need Donald J. Trump back in the White House to bring a steady hands at the wheel and a strong commander-in-chief. You know, he would have already had the answers. He would have already delivered to the American people and certainly to members of Congress. So leadership matters. That's why he got the mandate. That's why the American people can't wait for the America First agenda to start, and we can't wait either.
All right, good luck the next 72 hours and on your vote in the next 17 days. Thanks so much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Thanks,
Merry
guys.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Yeah.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.